Hello, my name's Simon Zutshi, and in this video, I want to explain how you can replace your income with passive income from property, even if you're completely new to property investing. So hello, my name is Simon Zutshi. I'm the author of Property Magic, the Amazon #1 property bestseller. I'm the founder of the Property Investors Network, which is the largest network around the UK for property investors. And I've been teaching people like you how to become successful property investors since 2003. And you know what? I'm just like you. And I started in property when I actually got my first job as a graduate trainee at Cadbury's in Birmingham. And basically, as soon as I got my first job, I bought my first house. Now, it was somewhere for me to live, and I actually rented out 2 of the rooms to my friends who were still studying university. And also, I wanted my own home, and I had this perfect graduate job, and I thought I was going to stay in work in this great company forever. Great company, great products, great people, and I could see myself going to the top of the ladder because I was on the graduate trainee scheme. I had big thoughts and aspirations, and that's what I thought you had to do to become successful. You know, get a good education, get a good job, work your way up the corporate ladder. And for a while, that was great, and it is a great company, great people. But then I got a little bit resentful that I was basically trading my time for money. I don't know about you, but I found that just having maybe 5 weeks holiday a year was just not enough. And I had to go into work, and I was working really hard because when I started on the graduate scheme, basically the point is that you're working really hard in lots of different departments, and hopefully someone gives you a job at the end of the 2 or 3 year period. Now, because I was saving lots of my money from my income, because I had 2 people renting rooms in my house that were pretty much covering the costs, and I had a part-time business running student nightclub events as well, which is a good fun business at the time, I had some money saved up in my business bank account, and I decided to buy another property. You see, I wanted to move slightly closer to Cadbury's where I was working, so I decided to buy another one, and rather than sell my first property, I decided to hold on to it and rent it out to students at Birmingham University, because it was just next to Birmingham University, perfect location. And when I was a student, I had met my first landlord, and he lived in a massive house on a very posh road called Farquhar Road. And I remember thinking, wow, this guy's making a lot of money. Maybe I can do this one day. So although it was kind of accidental, I'd always thought I'd like to get into property at some point, but I just didn't know how to do it. And I must admit, when I thought about renting a property out, I had all this fear about, well, will I find tenants? Will they pay me the rent? Will they trash the property? And you know what? All these things that I was worried about when I started renting my first house out to students in 1998, they weren't really problems. They were just fears that I was conjuring up in my head. And so I moved into this second property, a bit close to work, to Cadbury's, rented out the first one. And it was in 1998, I had this real epiphany. And I realized that houses are like cash machines. You see, the theory about investing in property is that at the end of each month, there's some money left over. You take the rent, you take off the mortgage, you take off the insurance, any maintenance costs. And at first I was managing properties myself, but now I don't manage any of my properties. Other people do it for me. And so I take off the management fees as well. And after all of that, there should be some money left over for you. Now, this was pretty interesting because I noticed that at Cadbury's, I was working 200 plus hours every single month. And I was making at the time in 1998, maybe about £1,500 profit every single month in Cadbury's. However, compare that to my one rental property that was my original home. I started renting out in 1998, and I was making £500 profit a month, but I was only putting in 2 hours, if that, into managing that property. And I kind of thought, hang on a minute, £1,500 for 2 hours work compared to £500 for 200 hours work compared to £500 for 2 hours work, you know, which would I rather do? And although I loved my job, I thought, you know what? I want to get more property. And that's when I started buying more and more property. Now, When you first start investing, there are lots of questions you might have, such as, well, what area should I invest in? What strategy should I use? How do I fund my property developments? A lot of people want to get into property, but they think you need to have a lot of money. And I'm going to share with you the traditional model that most people use. And absolutely, most people, they use money usually from equity they've released from their own home, or maybe they've inherited a property, or maybe they have a windfall profit they invest out, or they have money in their business, they use that to build their property portfolio. So people invest in different ways. But most people don't know what makes a good property and what doesn't. You see, when I first started, I had no idea. I just bought a house for me to live in. I was living in Selly Oak. I literally walked out of the house, looked up the road from my student house, and there was one that was for sale. I walked in and it was a palace compared to the house that I was living in. Now, it was the same size, same layout, but it just looked really nice. And I wanted to live there. And so my friends wanted to come and live with me. So it worked really, really well. But I was kind of lucky, really. I actually bought in an area where they had very strong rental demand and where the capital appreciation has been very strong as well. And it was perfect for me to walk to Cadbury's where I was working. But the problem is most people don't know what makes a good deal or not. And when I happened to move out of that first house, I didn't have to go and find another one to buy. I just rented the first house that I bought, which I knew would work very well for students. So a lot of people, they'll do this. And bear in mind that properties are cash machines. They might just look at it and say, well, which do you prefer the look of? Do you prefer the one on the left, or do you prefer the one on the right? Let me ask you, which would you want? Now, appearance is not the most important thing. People say, oh, well, yeah, I like a nice house, got to look good. And yes, you want it to look okay inside. The outside is not so important. But really, you need to consider, what does this property actually do for you? If we understand that one property on the left-hand side might make you £100 a month and another property might make you £1,000 a month, which of these properties do you actually want? Well, most people say, well, I'd like the one with £1,000 a month, please. Because here's the point. You might want to get into property and you might think, well, for me to replace my income, I'm going to need 40, 50 properties. And if you're buying properties that make you £100 a month, well, you might well need that money. But if you're buying properties that make you £1,000 a month, well, actually, maybe just between 4 and 6 of these properties might be enough to replace your income. So in this video, I want to help you understand that actually you're not that far away from replacing your income. You don't need to buy 50 properties. It's not going to take you 10 years to get there. You can get there quickly if you know how to do it. So my question is, if you were making £1,000 profit per month, how many of these would you need to replace your income? Now, you are in a fortunate position. When I started investing, there was no one to help me. I, unlike you, didn't have someone like me who could teach you what to do. But you don't have to go and work this out for yourself. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are people out there who have done what you want to do, and you can learn from them. Now, by 2001, I bought enough of these cash machines to replace my income. I didn't completely replace my income, but I had enough to live on. So I knew that property worked, and I decided to leave my full-time job at Cadbury. Now, that was a big decision because remember, I liked my job, I liked the people, I liked the product, and actually Cadbury's was the perfect employer for me, and I had intended to go all the way to the top of the company or as high as I possibly could. But I just wanted my freedom back, and that's why I decided to leave. And then I did property for a couple more years, and then by 2003, I'd actually managed to replace my income. So I fully replaced my former salary by 2003. So it took me 8 years. 8 years because I didn't know how to do it. None of my family had ever invested before. None of my friends who invested. They were all busy at work. I did it very much on my own through trial and terror. Now, compare that 8 years that it took me to do it with Greg. So Greg was one of my friends. I met him at Cadbury's. He started the year before me in 1994. And Greg actually stayed at Cadbury's and worked his way to the top of the corporate ladder. In fact, Greg's last position at Cadbury's, he was head of chocolate. How cool is that? head of chocolate at Cadbury's. Now, it was actually head of chocolate, supply and demand, UK and Ireland. So not quite as sexy, but still head of chocolate. And Greg took redundancy in 2014. Cadbury's was brought out by a company called Kraft. And for Greg to move up the ladder, he would have had to go to Switzerland. And actually, he had a couple of young kids in school in Birmingham. Unfortunately, at the time, his parents were both diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So he really didn't want to leave Birmingham. And he knew me, obviously. He knew I'd left Cadbury's thanks to my property. So he looked me up. He read my book. He liked that. He came and did a 3-day mastermind accelerator training with his wife, Jane, who was in my year at Cadbury's. And then he came on our mastermind program. And because he followed a formula, because I had done the learning and the hard work before him, instead of taking 8 years to replace his income, Greg replaced his income in just 8 months. And I can tell you, Greg's leaving salary was probably 2.5 or 3 times more than my leaving salary. So not only did he do it much, much quicker, he actually replaced it with a much higher amount of money because he wasn't trying to work it out on his own. Now, this now leads me to the next thing. Okay, so in theory, you get it, right? You see why you should have properties. You don't need that many of them to actually replace your income. But how do you actually go about funding those properties? Well, there are a couple of ways you do it. When you get an investment property, you don't buy it all of your money, you don't buy it cash. Typically, you'll go to a bank and you'll get a mortgage, 75% of the value. So let's say you're buying a property at £200,000. You would be required to get a mortgage from a bank for 150,000, 75%, and then you'd put in a 25% deposit. In this case, it will be £50,000. Now, the problem is a lot of people think, well, hang on a minute, I don't have that £50,000 or I can't get mortgages. Don't worry, I'm going to give you a solution to that problem in just a moment. But this is what you do. Now, a lot of people have a lot of beliefs about what they can and what they can't do. The reality is most people can get an investment mortgage because it's not based on your income. It's based on the rental income that comes into the property because you're not the person living there. It's an investment. You've got tenants living there, paying you a rent. As long as you know how to find the right properties in the right area, that's going to more than cover the cost of the mortgage and give you a profit as well. And the way most people get deposits, maybe they've got some savings, maybe they've got some money in their business account, maybe they're using their pension, maybe they get some inheritance or some redundancy, or maybe they're just remortgaging their own home, which is how most people get into property. However, at some point, most people run out of their own deposit money, and that means they have to stop investing. However, there are strategies I'm going to talk about in this training, in this video, where you don't need to have mortgages and you don't even need to have big deposits. So listen very carefully. Now, what a lot of people say to me, Simon, you know, you've been investing for years. You know how to do this, easy for you. I don't even know where to start. How do I start investing? Well, first of all, you need to think about what you actually want to achieve. And for many people, replacing their income is a good start. So you need to work out how much is that, okay? Then you need to think about, okay, why do I want it? If I was able to replace my income, what would I do? Now, some people, it's very clear they hate their jobs. They don't want to do it. They need something else to cover all their living costs. So in other words, they can start spending life doing what they want to do. Many people are fortunate to love their job, as I loved my job at Cadbury's. But you know what? They want additional income coming in because they're worried if something was to happen to them or something happened to that business or their job, they'd lose their means of supporting themselves and their family. You know, I think one thing that everybody learned back in 2020 when COVID hit was how risky it is to have just one source of income coming in. Look how many millions of people were put onto furlough and how many people, their businesses were lost and they only had one stream of income and they were then in financial difficulty. So it's really important that you have multiple streams of income coming in and you replace the source of income. So if something happens, you can support your family. So for most people investing, there are two strategies, or they're really kind of tools, if you like, that you should be thinking about if you are starting investing. And you may have heard about them. The first one is called rent to rent. Now, this is where you take on a property, usually from another landlord who is struggling with that property. Maybe they're a remote landlord, they're trying to do things at a distance. Maybe they've had a bad letting agent, they've had some bad tenants, and they've just been put off being a landlord. Or maybe that particular property is causing them a problem. And you come in, you fix that, you sort it out, you get it tenanted, and basically you pay the landlord a certain amount of rent, you get a higher amount of rent, and so you get cash profit every single month from a property you don't own. The benefit is you don't need mortgages, you don't need a big deposit, and you can do it very, very quickly to get income coming in once you understand the strategy. Now, you can use rent to rent with a number of different strategies. You can do it on houses of multiple occupation. You could do it on serviced accommodation. And if you're going to pick a strategy, my recommendation is you need to learn how to do that strategy, obviously, but pick a strategy that's going to give you very high cash flow. Because once you get a few of these properties together, not only do you get a lot of great income coming in, you then also have enough income to pay someone else to do the work for you. Now, at first, you're going to have to do a bit of the work, but you can very much do this part-time. You might be running a business or working for someone else. In your spare time, you can absolutely manage a few properties once you know what you're doing. And rent to rent is a great way to start. But the one problem with rent to rent is that you have to give the property back to the owner, typically after 3 to 5 years. So a better tool for you to use to make cash flow from property is what's called a purchase lease option or a lease option. This is where you take a property on from a landlord, similar to rent, you give them a guaranteed rental income, you rent it out for more money, so you make cash flow on a property that you don't own. But you also have the right to buy that property at some time in the future if you want to buy that property. Now, you don't have to buy the property. You can buy it if you want to. And that's incredibly powerful, because what that means is, as well as getting cash flow coming in, you can also benefit from potential capital growth. Now, if you don't want to buy the property, you don't have to. But if it goes up in value, you can either buy it or you could sell it on to someone else, and you can make a cash profit on a property that you don't even own. Now, I know it sounds a bit crazy. You might think, why on earth would a landlord do this? Why would they give me this property? Why would they not just rent it out themselves? What you need to understand is, in any market, there's always people coming into the market starting as you are, and there's also always people who are exiting the market, who are retiring. And right now, there's never been a bigger time in history where as many landlords are leaving the market. And this is for a number of reasons. The terms that we do business under have changed a little bit. There's more legislation from the government. They changed the way that we are taxed as property investors. So for existing landlords, many of them feel it's not as good as it used to be. And with rising interest rates, etc., these are all problems. Now, you coming in as a new investor, well, actually, you can structure things in a way that many of these problems do not affect you. For example, if you're getting a mortgage on a property, you can fix the interest rates. You're not affected by interest rates going up. So actually, whilst many existing landlords are deciding to retire, make maximum benefit of the phenomenal capital growth they've had over the last 10 or 12 years, it's a great opportunity to come in as long as you know what you are doing. And this is the question people always ask me. Look, they see prices really high. They say, oh, the market's really high. Is it a good time to invest? Let me share a little secret with you. So when I bought my second property in 1998, I wanted to move closer to Bourneville, to Cadbury's, which is where Bourneville, where Cadbury's is based. And it's the next suburb to Selly Oak, where I was living at the time. And I bought my house in 95 for £48,500. And I was looking around in Bourneville, and a similar style house was £80,000 just a few years later. And I thought, that's crazy. These prices are so high. They're way overpriced. It's never worth that. So I bought in an area just adjacent to Selly Oak and Bourneville called Selly Park. I bought a house for £55,000. It seemed much better value. And I felt the prices were really, really high. And this is what everybody feels when they're new to the property market. And yes, prices are high right now, but let me share with you. We live on this island with a limited supply of accommodation and an increasing population. What that means is over the long term, property prices rise. Now, property prices do not always go up. They come up and they also come down. It's a cyclical market, just like any other market. The last big correction we had was in 2008, 2009, just after the global financial crisis, the credit crunch. Prices all came down. We haven't had a dip in the property market since that point. We are long overdue a dip. And many people believe that actually we might see a dip coming up soon because of all the changes happening, because of the recession, etc., etc. Now, whether that happens or not, we don't know. In fact, this video is actually video number 1 of a 3-part series. And in the next video, I'm going to be talking all about why now is a great time to invest. Should you buy now? Should you wait? But all you need to understand is right now, there are more and more landlords than ever before who are looking to get rid of their properties. And if the market does tip, lots of those landlords will be prepared to sell at a discount because they want to get out quickly. Now you might think, well, if they want to sell, why should I come in? Well, you are in a different position to them. If you're starting your journey, you might be prepared to hold property for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, I've been doing this for 27 years and I expect to hold my property for at least another 27 years beyond now. So 60, 70 years, I want to be holding my property. In fact, I'm probably never going to sell many of my properties. I will die and my property will still be there. My estate's going to benefit from all of my wealth. And actually, maybe that's one of the things you want. You want a legacy to give to your family and also to your loved ones. And that's another important reason why we invest in property. But the question about is now a good time to invest or not is something you need to be aware of and recognize that now is always a good time if you know. But I'm going to go into a lot more detail in the next video. So I hope this video has been useful for you. If you've got any questions, please type them below. You might want to share this on your social media for family, friends who also want a bit of help. And in the next video, I'm also going to answer your questions. If you've got any particular questions about what I've talked about here, do type those questions below this video. I will answer as many of those as I possibly can. So until the next video, I encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. I do hope you got massive value from watching this YouTube video. I'd encourage you to click on the link below to come and do the online training with me. And I've got another video lined up for you, which I think is also going to be really useful that you should watch once you've registered for the online training with me. So invest with knowledge, invest with skill. I'll see you very soon.